when survival became a daily habit. For over 100 years, no one remembers the exact moment survival stopped being urgent, because for him, it never did. Day after day, life remained something to be handled carefully, attentively, intentionally. This matters now because we treat survival as a phase, something temporary, a chapter that ends once stability arrives. But for him, survival became a rhythm, and that rhythm quietly carried him past a century. He was born into uncertainty. Scarcity shaped his earliest memories. Food was not guaranteed. Safety was negotiated. Attention mattered because mistakes were costly. Those early years trained him, not in fear, in awareness. He learned to notice changes quickly, to adjust before damage arrived, to conserve energy without withdrawing from life. As decades passed, the world stabilized around him. Others relaxed, assumed safety, delegated vigilance to systems. He did not. Survival was never dramatic. It was practical. Daily choices, small corrections, consistent restraint. He did not chase comfort. He respected function. If something worked, it stayed. If it wasted energy, it was removed. This applied to objects, habits, and emotions. People around him aged differently. They lived in cycles of intensity and collapse. He lived in continuity. No spikes, no crashes, just steady engagement. Doctors later struggled to explain this. They looked for stress reduction, for resilience markers, for biological advantages. But what they were observing was behavioral, a lifelong posture toward uncertainty. Survival, for him, was not an emergency response. It was maintenance. And maintenance, repeated long enough, becomes longevity. This was not a heroic story. It was an accumulated one. A life extended not by breakthroughs, but by refusing to waste what kept it going. The tension had not yet surfaced, because survival, when practiced quietly, does not announce its power. But over time, that quiet discipline will reveal something unsettling, that the habits we use to endure may be the same ones that allow us to last. This was only the beginning of the final story. As the years accumulated, survival shifted its shape. What once protected him from scarcity began protecting him from excess. He did not add habits. He refined them, removed anything that created strain without return. Noise, conflict, unnecessary urgency. His days were predictable but not rigid. Wake, move, eat, rest, observe, adjust. Nothing wasted, nothing rushed. Emotionally, this created an unusual stability. He did not swing between extremes. Joy arrived quietly. Loss arrived honestly. Neither was exaggerated. People around him misunderstood this. They assumed emotional restraint meant suppression. It did not. It meant regulation. Feel fully, then release. This became more visible with age. While others accumulated stress, he released it daily, before it hardened, before it demanded repair. Doctors noticed something strange. His health markers fluctuated less. Recovery took time, but setbacks did not cascade. The system corrected itself slowly, but consistently. What they were observing was not resistance. It was load management, a lifetime of not carrying more than necessary. This conflicted with modern ideals. Push harder, optimize, extract more from each day. He did the opposite. He preserved margin. As responsibilities faded with age, his survival habits did not. They adapted. Movement became simpler. Meals became smaller. Attention became sharper. The world grew louder, faster, more demanding. He did not match its pace. He maintained his own, and that is where tension formed. Because survival habits that protect life can appear restrictive in a culture built on excess. People questioned his simplicity, his restraint, his refusal to indulge freely. They saw limitation. He saw preservation. The conflict was no longer internal. It was contextual. A man living by rules shaped for endurance, in a world optimized for acceleration. And as he passed 100, that contrast sharpened, because survival was no longer expected. Yet it continued anyway. The question was no longer how he lived so long. It was what survival had quietly protected him from. The answer was approaching, and it would reframe everything. The conflict reached its peak when survival was no longer necessary, at least not by the world's standards. There was food, there was safety, there were systems designed to remove risk. Yet, he continued living as if margin still mattered. This confused people. They believed survival habits should fade once danger fades. That caution should give way to indulgence. That restraint should relax into ease. He did not agree, because he had learned something early. Survival is not a response to crisis. It is a relationship with uncertainty. As others aged, new vulnerabilities appeared. Chronic stress, sudden illness, sharp declines following small disruptions. Their systems had no buffer. His did. Emotionally, this was a turning point, because his longevity was no longer about avoiding death. It was about avoiding overload, avoiding accumulation, avoiding the quiet damage of excess. Doctors finally saw the pattern. His life had never demanded repair, only adjustment. There were no long recoveries, no dramatic rebounds, just steady correction. This is where the paradox became clear. Modern life treats endurance as temporary, but endurance practiced long enough becomes structure. His survival habits created a body that knew how to stabilize, a mind that knew how to release, a life that rarely exceeded capacity. The emotional peak came with recognition. That longevity was not granted. It was maintained, not through control, through respect. Respect for limits, for energy, for attention. He had never asked how long he would live. He asked how to remain functional tomorrow, and then did that again, and again, for over 100 years. This realization carried weight, because it challenged the idea that aging is about loss. Instead, it suggested something else, that many declines are not inevitable. They are cumulative, and cumulative damage, unlike time, can sometimes be managed. The final understanding was close, and it would change how survival itself was understood. The realization arrived without drama. Survival had never been a phase. It had been a foundation. Living past 100 was not the result of avoiding danger. It was a result of respecting capacity. Again and again, for a lifetime, he did not treat safety as permission to overextend. He treated it as a reason to preserve balance. When effort rose, he reduced elsewhere. When stress appeared, he released it early. Nothing accumulated long enough to cause collapse. Longevity, in his case, was not resistance to aging. It was avoidance of overload, the kind that slowly erodes systems, until recovery becomes impossible. This reframes how we think about long life, not as an achievement, not as luck, but as the outcome of thousands of small decisions, made with endurance in mind. Modern life encourages excess, more speed, more output, more stimulation, and then asks us to repair the damage later. He never accepted that bargain. He chose margin instead. Room to recover, room to adapt, room to continue. That choice did not make life smaller. It made it sustainable, decade after decade, without collapse, without dramatic decline. Survival became invisible because it worked, quietly, reliably, long after it was no longer required. And that is the uncomfortable lesson, that the habits we reserve for emergencies may be the same ones that allow us to last. So what do you think? Are we confusing comfort with longevity and paying for it slowly? When survival